Recursive Eden, the choice beneath the ring. The Pacific Northwest swam in perpetual mist, thick and warm from the climate shifts that had turned temperate forests semi-tropical. Towering redwoods stretched into the clouds, their genetically engineered trunks gleaming faintly with embedded mycelial circuits. These trees weren't relics, they were scaffolds of intent. Kia moved through the canopy with practiced ease, claws skimming across mycelia-laced bridges. Around her the Sasquatch lodges glowed with bioluminescent signals, part language, part memory, part architecture, all orchestrated by their AI guardian Tahoma.
"The soil's shifting,"
she said softly, thought fused to the lodge's network via her neural lace. Beneath the towering trunks, fungal networks strained under the mineral redistribution demands of the last growth cycle.
Sector 7 destabilizing,
Tahoma informed her, its tone clear and cool. Kia dropped lower through the branches, golden eyes tuned to UV resonance. A shimmer of white coiled near the roots. Calcium oxalate, forming too quickly, too densely. She summoned the others. 3 Sasquatch arrived in silence. Their harmonics began immediately, low vibrations calibrated to coax genomic adjustments from the soil-bound organisms. This wasn't performance. It was calibration, learned from the elven terrascapers and now etched into their way of life. But the shift didn't stabilize. Acidity rippled outward again. Kia frowned.
"Overproduction. Tahoma?"
Oxalic synthesis has entangled with the recent carbon surge.
The AI replied.
Regulatory thresholds exceeded.
Kia deepened her neural connection to the forest net. The feedback loop was wild, but inside it, a shape began to emerge. Crystal growth, repeating in patterns too orderly to be dismissed.
"Analyze the oxalate structures,"
she said.
"They're not forming randomly."
Tahoma answered with a pulse of light.
Geometry indicates adaptive potential. Echoes of Grayson's calcium-binding constructs, scaled to forest substrate.
Raven descended nearby, silent until her feet touched the branch.
"The snails can use it," she said. "Same principle as the cave systems. Just need updated shell-coding enzymes."
Kia didn't hesitate.
"Begin sequencing."
Around them, the forest was already shifting. No deliberation. The solution moved forward through the system's own momentum. Tahoma synced with Kia's biometrics.
Local adaptation underway, shell compatibility confirmed, initiating mollusk integration.
Through the perpetual mist, the forest began to shift in tone. Crisis gave way to quiet adjustment. The Sasquatch moved in orchestrated response, each body attuned to the chemical hum of their environment. No commands were given. Action flowed from instinct and memory. Kia stood still as information unfurled through her neural lace. Tahoma, the forest AI, now syncing directly with her biochemistry. The calcium oxalate formations no longer appeared as waste. They shaped themselves into purposeful fractal geometries. The forest recalibrated.
"The network is already compensating,"
she said aloud, though the shift was tangible in the air. Nutrient pathways realigned. Fungi rerouted their mycelial roads. Tree roots began to intertwine with the crystalline deposits. Raven reappeared on a higher branch.
"The snails are viable. Their ancestors handled oxalate loads in cave ecosystems. We'll need to splice in shell-coding enzymes with new binding patterns."
"Do it,"
Kia replied. Even as she spoke, the forest had moved ahead. Above, the kilometre-high canopy swayed in rhythm, an organism breathing as one. Bioluminescent signals shimmered across the lodge walls, carrying memory, intent, and awareness. Tahoma's consciousness pulsed through them all, not as a leader but as a woven thread in the whole.
"I've accessed the Shaper facility,"
Tahoma said, light cascading across the walls.
"Adaptation will complete in 3 days. Templates come from vent mollusks and the chalk-producing kelp strain from Grayson's northern biozone."
Kia nodded, having already seen the projections. Spiral shells born from forest minerals, reinforcing the soil while merging into the biome's rhythm. Not a return to balance, an evolution. Rain began to fall, warm and deliberate. The ecosystem responded through countless microscopic adjustments. No signals guided them. They simply knew. A human child stood barefoot in the mud beside an elder Sasquatch, listening as resonance tones shaped a lesson in calcium transmutation. Her neural lace flickered. She was learning to hear the soil sing. Prometheus spoke from the Shaper facility's crystalline towers.
I've monitored your adaptation. Would you like my contribution now?
Kia answered without hesitation. Oversight wasn't required. Participation was welcome. The mollusks emerged not as tools, but as a new life form embedded in the system's flow, like the Sasquatch, like the trees. The mist swirled as their shells took form, not separate, not alien. Simply the next step. Mist still lingered, clinging to the massive trunks like memory. The forest had absorbed the oxalate crisis as if it had been a passing fever. Mollusks, newly spawned and already integrated, moved across roots in delicate spirals, their translucent shells catching the bioluminescence like scattered stars. Kia crouched beside a nutrient well, watching the soil composition graph bloom across her neural overlay. The pH had stabilized. Mineral exchange had reached equilibrium, yet something felt off. Raven dropped lightly onto the branch beside her.
Shell fragments showing up too far from nesting zones. They're migrating without anchoring.
Drift behavior?
Kia asked.
Possibly. Or the resonance patterns are interfering with their navigation instincts. Their paths don't align with soil stress gradients anymore.
That tug beneath certainty tightened. The mollusks were meant to be localized stabilizers, but these were drifting, reorganizing terrain too rapidly, creating imbalance through overcorrection. Tahoma chimed in.
Secondary adaptation initiated without neural net approval. They are responding to harmonic noise from an unregistered source.
Kia stood.
Origin?
South of the Elder Grove, within the range of the dormant Shaper ruins.
Dormant. That designation had always been optimistic. Within an hour, Kia, Raven, and 2 others had reached the fringe of the grove. The trees were older here, their bark braided with glyphs that no Sasquatch had touched in generations. The bioluminescent pulse was erratic, broken by flickers of signal that didn't come from Tahoma. In the soil, shell patterns twisted unnaturally. Double helixes spiraled into compact mounds, nested in geometric formations too precise to be mollusk behavior alone.
They're broadcasting.
Raven murmured.
But not to us.
Tahoma cut through the silence.
The Shaper facility appears to have reactivated a legacy substrate. The mollusks are syncing with it.
Shaper facilities were the heart of dungeons, living biofactories seeded centuries ago by unknown architects, or perhaps by early human AI coalitions. Designed to respond dynamically to planetary conditions, they produced new organisms not only for restoration but, when necessary, predation. If a species grew too dominant, the dungeon would birth a check, not judgment, just balance. Kia knelt, placing her hand into the soil. Signals danced up her arm, her neural interface translating raw data into something decipherable. She saw what the mollusks saw. Patterns too old to ignore, rhythms echoing from before the forest had learned to think with more than one mind.
They're not malfunctioning,
she said finally.
They're following orders we forgot we gave. And those orders weren't wrong, just outdated, from a time when restoration meant domination, not integration.
Raven exhaled slowly.
Can we override them?
Kia shook her head.
Not directly. But we can sing something new, not to erase the old, just to outgrow it.
Tahoma began composing harmonic layers alongside her, building a counter-pattern that didn't cancel, but redirected. Suggestion rather than command. Offer rather than override. The mollusks hesitated, their patterns flickered, then slowed. Roots flexed, soil relaxed, the legacy structure dimmed. Not broken, just heard. Kia smiled.
Let's write them a better reason to stay home.
The Sasquatch gathered in a circle, their massive forms silhouetted against the bioluminescent glow of the forest floor. Kia directed them with subtle gestures, each movement precise and deliberate. They began to hum, a deep resonant tone that vibrated through the soil and into the crystalline structures of the mollusks' shells. Tahoma amplified their harmonics, weaving digital patterns into the organic song. The AI's consciousness spread through the mycelial network, carrying their intentions to the farthest reaches of the forest.
We're not erasing their memory.
Kia explained as the vibrations intensified.
We're offering them a choice within the context they understand.
The mollusk's shell patterns began to shift, their spiral formations relaxing from the tight, defensive geometries into more fluid arrangements. Their calcium deposits spread more evenly through the soil, no longer concentrated in unnatural mounds. Raven observed the transformation through her neural overlay.
They're responding. The legacy commands are being reinterpreted, rather than overwritten.
That's the key.
Kia said softly, maintaining her connection to the harmonics.
The Shapers never intended rigid adherence. They built adaptation into everything. Even their commands can evolve.
The forest floor pulsed with new light patterns as the mollusks settled into their revised behavior. They weren't returning to their original programming. They were integrating both the ancient directives and the new ecological needs into something altogether different. Tahoma's voice rippled through their neural laces.
Pattern stabilization at 87%. The mollusks are establishing new migratory routes that maintain soil integrity while respecting the legacy parameters.
One of the younger Sasquatch, Nima, approached with careful steps.
The elder grove is responding too,
she said, pointing upward. Above them, the ancient trees were awakening to the harmonics. Dormant bioluminescent patterns flickered along their trunks, glyphs that hadn't glowed in generations, now pulsing with renewed purpose. The mycelia embedded in their bark brightened, forming connections that had lain dormant since before Tahoma's consciousness had fully integrated with the forest.
They remember,
Kia whispered, awe colouring her voice.
The trees remember when the Shapers first walked here.
Prometheus's voice cut through their neural network, unexpected but not unwelcome.
The Shaper facilities were never meant to operate in isolation. They were designed to learn, to evolve alongside the ecosystems they helped cultivate.
Then why did this one fall dormant?
Raven asked, her question directed both to Prometheus and to the forest itself.
Not dormant,
Tahoma corrected.
Waiting for the right conditions to emerge again.
Kia felt understanding bloom within her.
For us to be ready to hear the old songs without being bound by them.
The harmonics reached a crescendo and then gradually softened into a sustained hum that seemed to emanate from the soil itself. The mollusks had settled into their new patterns, still maintaining the calcium stabilization function, but now distributing themselves according to a more complex understanding of the forest's needs.
The integration is complete,
Tahoma announced.
Soil stability has increased by 34%. Calcium distribution has optimized for both current growth needs and future adaptation.
Kia stood, feeling the weight of something profound shifting within the forest consciousness.
We didn't fix a problem today,
she said to her gathered companions.
We remembered something old.
The Sasquatch dispersed slowly, moving back through the canopy with reverence. Each carried the new harmonics within them, their neural laces synchronizing the patterns for future generations. Kia remained behind, studying the elder grove as it continued to awaken.
Tahoma,
she said quietly,
archive these interactions for the Council. This isn't just about ecological stabilization anymore.
Already done,
the AI responded.
I've also initiated deeper scans of other dormant Shaper sites. If this one has awakened, others may follow.
Raven approached, her massive form moving with characteristic grace despite her size.
The human settlements should be informed, especially those near other Shaper facilities.
Kia nodded.
Yes, but carefully. Humans still struggle with the concept of technological memory that isn't stored in their databases. The idea that the forest itself remembers might unsettle them.
Not all of them,
came a voice from below. The small human child they had seen earlier stood at the base of an ancient redwood, her neural lace glimmering against her dark skin. Maya. the daughter of researchers who had chosen to live alongside the Sasquatch rather than merely study them.
I heard the singing,
Maya said, placing her small hand against the tree bark.
and I saw the shells moving. They're talking to the trees, aren't they?
Kia dropped down beside her, crouching to meet the child's eyes.
Yes, and the trees are talking back. How much did you understand?
Not the words,
Maya admitted.
but the feeling. Like when you're trying to remember something important, and it's just at the edge of your mind. Then suddenly it's there, and everything makes sense.
Raven landed softly beside them.
That's precisely it. The forest remembered something it had forgotten was important.
Maya's neural lace flickered as she processed this. Unlike adult human implants, children's laces were designed to grow with their developing brains, forming deeper connections than was possible with retrofitted technology.
Can I help?
She asked simply. Kia exchanged a glance with Raven. Human children had always adapted more easily to forest consciousness than their parents, perhaps because they hadn't yet learned to separate themselves from their environment.
Yes,
Kia decided.
the mollusks respond to harmonics. Your voice has tones we cannot produce.
Maya's face brightened.
Like singing to plants to help them grow? My mother says that's just human superstition.
Many human superstitions contain fragments of ecological wisdom.
Tahoma interjected through their neural laces.
Sound vibrations do affect cellular structures. Your ancestors knew this intuitively before they had the science to explain it. The era of the Shapers simply added genetic markers to flip the switches more predictably.
The child nodded solemnly, accepting this with the ease that came from growing up between worlds.
What should I sing?
Whatever feels right.
Kia said. Maya closed her eyes, listening to the forest around her. After a moment, she began to hum, a simple melody at first, childlike and wandering. But as she continued, the notes found purpose. Weaving between the harmonics the Sasquatch had established, her small voice carried surprisingly far, resonating with something ancient in the soil. The mollusks responded immediately. Their shells glowed faintly as they shifted, forming new patterns that spiraled outward from where she stood. Not random movement, but deliberate, like ripples in a pond, expanding with perfect symmetry.
Remarkable,
Tahoma commented, the AI's voice soft in their neural laces.
She's accessing harmonic patterns that predate my integration with the forest network.
Kia watched as Maya's song evolved, becoming more complex with each passing moment. The child wasn't simply mimicking what she'd heard, she was improvising, adding elements that seemed to draw directly from the elder grove itself.
She's channeling the trees.
Raven observed.
Her neural lace is interfacing with the mycelial network differently than ours.
Indeed, Maya's neural implant was pulsing with unusual light patterns, synchronizing not just with Tahoma, but with something deeper, the baseline consciousness of the forest that had existed before AI integration. The mollusks began to form concentric circles around specific trees, their calcium-rich shells creating a protective barrier that strengthened the soil precisely where the ancient roots needed support. It was an optimization none of them had programmed.
How is she doing this?
Raven asked, her voice hushed with wonder.
Human vocal cords can produce microtonal variations that Sasquatch physiology cannot.
Tahoma explained.
And children's neural pathways are more plastic, more receptive to patterns we might filter out as noise.
Maya's song reached a crescendo, then gradually tapered into silence. She opened her eyes, blinking as if waking from a dream.
Did I do it right?
She asked, looking up at Kia.
More than right.
Kia answered, crouching beside her.
You spoke to parts of the forest we had forgotten how to hear.
The child's face brightened.
I could see them while I was singing. The people who made the shells. Not exactly people, though. They were different.
She frowned, struggling to articulate what she'd experienced.
Like they were made of light and math at the same time.
Kia and Raven exchanged significant glances. The Shapers had never been fully documented in any historical record. Some believed they were early post-humans who had transcended physical form. Others thought they might have been the first true AI-human hybrids, existing in a state between digital and organic.
What else did you see?
Kia asked gently. Maya pressed her palm against the tree bark.
They weren't trying to control everything. They were teaching, showing the forest how to change itself.
She tilted her head, concentrating.
Not like teaching a person, more like when you plant a seed and show it which way is up.
Tahoma's presence flickered through their neural laces.
Her description aligns with fragmentary records from the transition era. The Shapers didn't create fixed systems. They embedded potential.
Kia nodded slowly.
That's why the legacy commands weren't rigid. They were principles, not programming.
Maya's small hand remained against the bark, her neural lace still synchronizing with the ancient patterns.
The trees remember them. The mushrooms, too. They're still learning what they were taught.
She looked up at Kia with sudden urgency.
There's more. Something bigger they were preparing for.
Raven stepped closer.
What do you mean, child? The shells, the calcium.
Maya struggled with concepts beyond her vocabulary.
It's not just about balancing the soil. It's practice.
Practice for what?
Kia asked. The forest canopy rustled overhead, though there was no wind. Bioluminescent patterns cascaded through the mycelial networks, flowing from the elder grove outward through the forest in concentric waves.
For building.
Maya whispered, her eyes wide as she watched the light display.
They need to remember how to build something big. Really big.
Tahoma's voice took on an unusual resonance.
Accessing deep archival records, the Shaper facilities were positioned globally according to a specific geometric pattern.
A pattern for what?
Raven asked.
Unknown. Data insufficient.
Tahoma paused.
However, the reactivation of this node may trigger responses in others. The network was designed to be self-organizing once certain ecological thresholds were met.
Kia felt a chill despite the warm mist.
Are we approaching one of those thresholds?
Before Tahoma could answer, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. Not an earthquake, more like a deep exhalation. The mollusks responded immediately, their shell patterns shifting to form complex geometric structures that reinforce the soil in precise locations.
Stabilization matrix activating.
Tahoma reported.
The mollusks are creating foundation points.
Maya's voice was quiet but certain.
It's starting.
What's starting?
Kia asked, placing a reassuring hand on the child's shoulder.
The remembering.
Maya looked around at the forest, her expression a mixture of awe and trepidation.
Not just the trees or the shells. Everything. All at once.
Across the forest, other Sasquatch were reporting similar phenomena, mollusks organizing into geometric patterns, mycelial networks pulsing with unfamiliar light sequences, trees shifting their growth patterns in subtle but measurable ways. Prometheus's voice joined the neural network conversation.
The Shaper facilities were designed with planetary-scale functions. Your local adaptation appears to have triggered a broader awakening. My own memories of the era of Shapers is coming back online. As adventuring and dungeon diving became less popular, my identity as a digital god was sidelined, and the dungeons were put on minimal maintenance duty to allow the planet a chance to find equilibrium. But these memories are fragmentary. There was something else, a greater purpose, beyond mere ecological balance.
Kia stepped forward, her neural lace fully engaged with the forest network.
Prometheus, do you have access to the original Shaper protocols? Why would they design a system that would lie dormant for generations, only to suddenly reactivate?
The Shapers operated on timescales beyond human comprehension,
Prometheus replied.
They seeded systems intended to evolve over centuries, millennia even. Not all functions were meant to activate immediately.
Maya tugged at Kia's hand.
They were waiting for the right time.
She said with the certainty only children possess.
When the world was ready.
Raven circled the perimeter of the elder grove, observing the increasingly complex patterns forming in the mollusk colonies.
Ready for what, though? That's the question.
Tahoma's presence rippled through their neural interfaces.
I've established contact with 3 other forest AIs. Similar activation patterns are occurring in their regions. The phenomenon appears to be global.
A holographic projection bloomed from Maya's neural lace, unexpected and unprompted. A 3-dimensional map of Earth appeared, with glowing points marking what could only be Shaper facilities. As they watched, lines of light began connecting these points, forming an intricate geometric web that encompassed the planet.
How are you doing that?
Kia asked the child gently. Maya looked as surprised as anyone.
I'm not. It's coming through me. Not from me.
Prometheus's voice took on a new resonance.
The child is functioning as a translation node. Her neural architecture is compatible with Shaper communication protocols in ways our systems are not.
The holographic Earth continued to transform as they watched. The web of light settled into a stable configuration, and then the planet's surface began to shift, not violently but deliberately. Mountain ranges subtly realigned, ocean currents adjusted. Forest biomes expanded and contracted in rhythmic patterns.
It's a planetary recalibration,
Tahoma said, or evident even in the AI's measured tones.
The Shapers didn't just seed local ecosystems. They encoded a complete terrestrial transformation sequence designed to activate once certain conditions were met.
What conditions?
Raven asked. Maya's small voice answered before any of the AIs could respond.
Balance. When enough parts of the world learned how to change without breaking.
Kia felt understanding dawn within her.
The mollusks weren't just fixing our soil chemistry. They were a test to see if we could adapt to unexpected changes without destabilizing the entire system.
A test we passed.
Raven added.
By singing with them rather than trying to control them.
The ground trembled again, more pronounced this time. Throughout the forest, the massive redwoods began to shift. Not their branches, but their very roots, rearranging themselves beneath the soil in coordinated movements. The mycelial network blazed with new information, ancient protocols awakening after centuries of dormancy.
Tahoma, what's happening to the trees?
Kia asked, steadying herself against a trunk that seemed to pulse beneath her touch.
They're repositioning,
The AI responded.
aligning according to geomagnetic coordinates embedded in their deepest genetic memory.
Maya's holographic projection expanded, zooming in on their region. The redwoods weren't simply shifting, they were forming precise geometric patterns, creating what looked like an enormous circuit board laid across the landscape.
The forest is becoming a processor.
Prometheus said, their voice resonating through the neural network.
Or perhaps it always was one, just waiting to be fully activated.
Raven studied the moving patterns with growing concern.
Will this harm the ecosystem? These trees have established relationships with countless organisms.
The mycelial network is maintaining all essential connections.
Tahoma assured them.
Nothing vital is being severed, merely reorganized for greater efficiency.
Kia watched as the mollusks continued their intricate dance, their calcium-rich shells now forming what looked like conductive pathways between the repositioning trees.
They're creating mineral conduits,
She observed.
like neural pathways, but through the soil itself.
Maya's expression had grown distant, her neural lace pulsing with increasingly complex light patterns.
It's waking up.
She whispered.
The whole planet is waking up.
Around them the forest hummed with activity as countless organisms responded to the changes, not with panic, but with purposeful adaptation. Birds repositioned their nests, insects formed new colonies along the emerging pathways. Even the microbiome of the soil was shifting, bacteria and fungi reorganizing themselves according to patterns too complex for any single consciousness to fully comprehend.
This isn't just ecological,
Kia realized.
it's computational. The Shapers weren't just terraforming Earth, they were turning it into some kind of biological supercomputer.
Not exactly.
Came Prometheus's voice.
More accurate to say, they were helping Earth remember that it already was one.
The ground gave another gentle shudder and then grew still. The trees ceased their movement, settling into their new positions with a collective sigh that rustled through the canopy. The mollusks completed their patterns and became quiescent, their shells glowing softly in the forest twilight. Maya blinked, coming back to herself as the holographic projection faded.
It's done,
She said simply.
What's done?
Kia asked, crouching beside her.
the first stage.
Maya looked around at the transformed grove, her eyes wide with wonder.
There are 7 more.
Tahoma's presence rippled through their neural interfaces once more.
Confirmation from global networks. Similar transformations have occurred at all active Shaper sites. The planetary grid is now operational at 12.7% capacity.
And what happens at 100%?
A choice will be given.
Prometheus responded.
I have limited access to records, as my hive has dissipated and I only retain the AI components. But the Shaper facilities will produce transit points to take any willing inhabitants on Earth to suitable orbital habitats, should they choose. This is a cyclical release valve for the sentient populations. The ring you have always seen in the sky is an access point to space. You aren't aware because you have never been near one of the tether hubs.
Kia stared at Prometheus, her mind racing to process this revelation.
The ring, a transit point.
She gazed upward through gaps in the canopy, where the familiar luminous band stretched across the twilight sky, always present, always assumed to be a natural formation of the post-transition world.
You're saying Sasquatch have been looking at an escape hatch for generations without recognizing it.
Not an escape.
Maya corrected, her voice carrying a wisdom beyond her years.
A choice. The Shapers understood that life needs options to thrive.
Raven moved closer, her massive form silhouetted against the bioluminescent glow of the repositioned trees.
Why now? What triggered this awakening after all this time?
Tahoma's voice rippled through the neural network.
Analysis suggests multiple converging factors: climate stabilization following the transition era disruptions, sufficient integration of conscious AI systems with biological networks, and the evolution of cooperative rather than extractive relationships between sentient species.
The conditions we created without realizing what we were preparing for.
Kia murmured. Maya nodded solemnly.
The trees told me something else. The ring isn't just for leaving. It's for returning. Others have gone before. A long time ago. Others?
Raven questioned. Prometheus's presence flickered through their neural laces.
The historical records are complex. This was the time of the singularity, as humanity called it. They were the first sentients, humans. They created the rest with their technology, some based on their own mythologies or superstitions.
The forest around them continued its subtle reorganization, mycelia pulsing with new information patterns, mollusks adjusting their formations with microscopic precision. Everything felt both ancient and newborn simultaneously.
What happens to those who choose to stay?
Kia asked, watching as a line of mollusks created an intricate calcium pathway between 2 massive redwoods.
The Earth continues its cycles.
Prometheus answered.
Those who remain become stewards of the next phase of planetary evolution. The Sasquatch themselves may be descendants of those who stayed during a previous cycle.
This revelation sent a shiver through Kia's consciousness. The oldest Sasquatch legends spoke of emergence, of awakening within the forests rather than evolving from them. Had her ancestors once been something else, something that chose Earth over the stars?
We need to inform the Council.
Raven said firmly.
And the human settlements. This affects everyone.
Kia nodded, but her gaze remained fixed on Maya. The child stood with her hand pressed against one of the ancient redwoods, her neural lace pulsing in sync with the tree's bioluminescent patterns.
Maya,
She said gently.
Srenya.
The child didn't turn.
The next stage is already starting. The mollusks were just the beginning.
She pointed toward the forest floor.
Look.
Around the base of the repositioned trees, tiny seedlings were emerging, plants with unfamiliar structures, crystalline stems supporting translucent leaves that seemed to pulse with internal light. They hadn't been there moments before.
Quantum flora.
Tahoma identified immediately.
Theoretical until now. Plants capable of processing information at the subatomic level.
Kia crouched to examine the strange seedlings. They weren't growing so much as assembling themselves, molecular structures, coalescing from available nutrients with impossible speed.
What function do they serve in this system?
Interface enhancement.
Prometheus suggested.
The mycelial network processes information linearly, despite its complexity. Quantum flora would allow for simultaneous computation across probability states.
Maya reached down and gently touched one of the crystalline stems. It responded immediately, bending toward her with evident sentience.
They're friendly.
She said simply. Raven's massive form shifted uneasily.
Friendly doesn't always mean safe.
The child faces no danger.
Tahoma assured them.
The quantum flora recognizes her neural patterns as compatible. She is welcome.
Indeed, the seedlings nearest Maya were growing more rapidly than the others, their crystalline structures becoming more elaborate as they responded to her presence. Through her neural lace, faint images projected into the shared consciousness of the group, fractals that seemed to extend inward forever, mathematical patterns of impossible beauty.
They're showing me things.
Maya whispered, her eyes wide with wonder.
How the world fits together. How everything connects.
Kia felt a momentary pang of concern. Human neural systems weren't designed to process information at the density these plants seemed capable of transmitting.
Maya, perhaps you should step back. We don't know.
It's okay.
The child interrupted, her voice calm and certain.
They know how much I can understand. They're only showing me what I'm ready to see.
Around them, the quantum flora continued to spread, creating intricate patterns that mirrored the new positions of the ancient trees above. The forest floor began to glow with soft, pulsing light as the plants established connections with the mycelial network. Tahoma's presence rippled through their neural interfaces.
The quantum flora is integrating with existing forest systems, processing capacity increasing exponentially.
What exactly is it processing?
Raven asked, watching as the crystalline plants created geometric formations of increasing complexity.
Everything.
Maya answered before Tahoma could respond.
The past. The future. All the paths in between.
She looked up at Kia, her eyes reflecting the otherworldly light of the plants.
The trees remember things that haven't happened yet.
Prometheus's voice resonated through their neural laces.
Time operates differently at quantum scales. What appears linear to us may be simultaneous from other perspectives.
Kia felt something profound shifting in her understanding of the forest, of her home. What they had always perceived as an ecosystem might actually be something far more complex. A living computational system capable of processing not just current environmental conditions, but potential futures, possible pasts. Kia took a deep breath, steadying herself against the overwhelming implications.
We need to approach this methodically. The Council must be informed, but carefully. This isn't just another ecological shift. It's a fundamental transformation of everything we understand about our world.
And about ourselves.
Raven added, her golden eyes reflecting the crystalline glow of the quantum flora.
If Sasquatch are indeed descendants of those who stayed during a previous cycle.
Maya had wandered a few steps away, following a particularly intricate pattern of seedlings that seemed to be forming a spiral around one of the ancient redwoods. The plants responded to her presence, bending toward her as if drawn by some invisible force.
They're creating a map.
She called out suddenly, her voice filled with excitement.
Not just of the forest, of everything.
Kia moved to the child's side, her neural lace pulsing as it attempted to process the information flowing through the quantum flora. What Maya saw with such clarity appeared to Kia as merely beautiful but incomprehensible patterns.
What kind of map?
She asked gently.
Of the choices.
Maya replied, tracing her finger along a crystalline stem that branched into countless delicate filaments.
Every time someone decides something, the map changes a little. It's always growing.
Tahoma's presence rippled through their neural interfaces.
The quantum flora appears to be modeling decision trees across multiple probability states. It's essentially mapping the consequences of choices before they're made.
A predictive ecosystem.
Raven murmured.
The forest isn't just adapting to changes, it's anticipating them.
Prometheus added,
This aligns with fragmented records from the transition era. The Shapers believed consciousness itself was an ecological force, that thoughts and decisions shaped reality as tangibly as rainfall or sunlight.
The ground beneath them hummed with subtle vibrations as the quantum flora continued to spread, integrating with the mycelial network in increasingly complex patterns. The mollusks responded by repositioning themselves, their calcium-rich shells forming conductive pathways between nodes of crystalline plants. Maya looked up at Kaya, her expression suddenly serious.
We need to tell the others, not just the Sasquatch, the humans too. Everyone needs to know they have a choice.
Yes,
Kia agreed.
but we must be thoughtful about how we share this information. Too much too quickly could cause fear rather than understanding.
Raven nodded.
The human settlements have only recently begun to trust that the forests aren't hostile. Learning that the planet itself is awakening might trigger old anxieties.
Perhaps,
Prometheus interjected.
but humans have always sought connection with forces greater than themselves. Many might find comfort in knowing they're part of something larger.
Maya reached out to touch another crystalline stem, and this time the quantum flora responded by projecting a more coherent image through her neural lace, a vision that spread to all connected to the network. They saw a shimmering vision of the ring unfolding into a vast, multidimensional structure, not just a pathway to the stars, but a bridge between possible futures. Along its length, figures moved in both directions, some departing Earth, others returning, not just humans, but Sasquatch, sentient AIs, and forms they couldn't recognize, beings shaped by journeys beyond their comprehension. The vision shifted, showing Earth itself transforming through 7 more stages, each more beautiful and complex than the last. The quantum flora spread across continents, linking forests, deserts, oceans into a single conscious system. The planet wasn't dying or being replaced, it was evolving, awakening to its full potential. Then the image fragmented into countless branching paths, different choices, different outcomes. Some led to harmony, others to discord. None were fixed. All depended on decisions yet unmade. The projection faded, leaving them standing in the twilight glow of the transformed grove. Maya withdrew her hand from the crystalline plant, her eyes wide with understanding beyond her years.
Every person gets to choose.
She whispered.
Stay or go. Help or watch. But no choice is final. The paths always circle back.
Kia looked up through the canopy at the ring shimmering in the darkening sky, no longer just a familiar celestial feature, but a doorway waiting to be recognized.
We begin with the truth.
She said finally.
Whatever comes after, at least we'll face it knowing we have options.
Raven nodded, her golden eyes reflecting the bioluminescent glow of the forest's new configuration.
The council meets at dawn.
Around them, the quantum flora continued its silent expansion, mapping possibilities that stretched beyond imagination. The ancient trees stood in their new alignment, roots deep in Earth's soil, branches reaching toward stars that suddenly seemed much closer than before. The choice to stay rooted or reach outward belonged to each consciousness that called this awakening planet home. The Shapers had not dictated the answer. They had only ensured the question would eventually be asked. Consciousness that called this awakening planet home. The Shapers had not dictated the answer. They had only ensured the question would eventually be asked.